The communication room of the UNS Valiant was quiet that night. Daniel Brooks sat in his captain's chair, reviewing reports from the latest patrol around Jupiter's moons. He was tired. The past 3 weeks had been nothing but routine scans and equipment checks. Space was vast and empty, and sometimes Daniel wondered if humanity would ever find anything interesting out here. Then the speakers crackled to life. At first, it sounded like static, the kind of interference that came from solar flares or equipment malfunction. But Lisa Grant, the ship's communication officer, leaned forward in her seat. She had good ears, trained to pick out patterns in noise. Her fingers flew across her console, adjusting frequencies and filtering out background radiation. "Captain, I'm picking up something," she said. Her voice was steady, but Daniel could hear the excitement underneath. "It's a signal. Definitely artificial." Daniel stood up and walked over to her station. Other crew members were looking their way now, sensing that something was happening. In the 3 years since humanity had developed faster-than-light travel, they had been scanning the stars constantly, hoping to find other intelligent life. So far, they had found nothing but empty planets and dead rocks. "Can you clean it up?" Daniel asked. Lisa worked her controls for another minute. The static began to fade, replaced by something else. A voice. No, multiple voices, speaking in a language that sounded like music mixed with wind chimes. The ship's computer kicked in, analyzing the sounds and searching for patterns. Translation software that had been theoretical until this moment suddenly had a purpose. Words began to appear on the screen. Broken at first, missing pieces, but the meaning was clear enough to make Daniel's blood run cold. "Help us. They are killing everyone. Our cities are burning. We have no weapons. We have no defense. Please, anyone who can hear this, help us. We are dying." The message repeated over and over. Each time it played, Lisa managed to clean up a little more static. More details emerged. Coordinates to a star system 2,000 light-years away. Images of a planet with blue oceans and green continents. Pictures of beings that looked almost like tall, thin humans with silver skin and large eyes. Then came the other images. Cities in ruins. Ships in orbit firing down at the surface. Bodies in the streets. The pictures were grainy and corrupted, but they told a story that needed no translation. "Get me Admiral Carter," Daniel said quietly. "Right now." Lisa opened a channel back to Earth. It would take a few minutes for the signal to reach home, even using the new quantum communication system. Daniel used that time to gather his senior officers. Within 10 minutes, they were all assembled in the briefing room. Jake Morrison arrived first. He was young for a fighter pilot, only 24, but he had reflexes that made him one of the best. He looked excited, the way he always did when something broke the routine. Amy Sullivan came next, carrying a data pad and already analyzing the signal. She was the ship's tactical officer, always thinking 3 steps ahead. Ryan Hughes, the backup communication specialist, arrived with Lisa. They had been working together to decode more of the message. Steve Palmer, who commanded the small contingent of Marines stationed on the Valiant, was last. He was a big man, broad-shouldered and quiet, but Daniel had seen him in training. The man moved like a cat when he needed to. Daniel played the message for them. He watched their faces change as they understood what they were hearing. The excitement faded into something more serious, more angry. "Are we sure this is real?" Steve asked. "Not some kind of test or mistake?" "The computer has analyzed the signal," Amy said, looking at her data pad. "It's coming from exactly where they say it is. The star system exists. The level of detail in the transmission is too complex to be fake. Someone out there is really calling for help. And someone else is really killing them," Jake added. His usual smile was gone. The channel to Earth opened. Admiral Paul Carter's face appeared on the screen. He was an older man, gray hair cut short, eyes that had seen combat back when humanity still fought wars on Earth. He listened without interrupting as Daniel explained what they had found. When Daniel finished, there was a long silence. Daniel could see other people moving behind the Admiral. The message was already being shared with Earth's leadership. "How bad is it?" Carter asked. "Bad, sir," Daniel replied. "The message has been repeating for 3 days. We only just picked it up because we were in the right position. Based on the signal degradation, it was sent about 2 weeks ago. Whatever is happening there has been going on for at least that long." Carter nodded slowly. His face was grim. "Captain Brooks, you are to maintain your position and continue monitoring the signal. Gather every piece of information you can. I'm calling an emergency session of the Defense Council. We'll have a decision for you within 12 hours. The connection closed. Daniel turned to his crew. You heard the Admiral? Lisa, Ryan, I want you on that signal full time. Pull in whoever you need. Amy, start analyzing what we know about the attackers. Look for any patterns, any weaknesses. Steve, get your Marines ready. I don't know what's coming, but I want us prepared. What about me, Captain? Jake asked. Get some rest, Daniel said. If we're going where I think we're going, you're going to need it. The next 12 hours felt like 12 days. The crew of the Valiant worked without stopping. Lisa and Ryan managed to decode more of the message. The aliens calling for help were called the Velnar. They were a peaceful species, part of something called the Galactic Council. They had never developed weapons because in their part of space no one had needed weapons for thousands of years. Then the Krathiks had come. The Krathiks' dominion was an empire that believed in conquest. They swept through star systems, taking what they wanted and enslaving the populations. They had avoided the core council worlds before, but recently they had grown bold. The Velnar were their latest target. Amy discovered something interesting in the tactical data. The Krathiks fought in very rigid formations. They followed patterns like they were fighting by a rulebook. It made sense in a way. If everyone in the galaxy fought by the same rules, war became predictable, safe almost. But humanity had never been part of the Galactic Council. Humanity had learned war the hard way, over thousands of years of bloody history. They didn't fight by anyone's rules but their own. Steve Palmer reviewed the information about the Krathiks' ground forces. They were big, heavily armored, and strong. They relied on their size and technology to overwhelm opponents. But they were slow. They moved in straight lines. They didn't use cover the way human soldiers did. They fight like they've never faced real resistance, Steve said, like they expect everyone to just give up. Daniel thought about that. He thought about humanity's history, all the wars, all the struggles, all the times they had been knocked down and gotten back up. Earth was classified as a death world by galactic standards. Gravity too high, temperature swings too extreme, diseases too numerous, predators too dangerous. Yet humans thrived there. They had evolved to survive on a planet that was constantly trying to kill them. What would that look like to species that had evolved on easier worlds? The 12 hours ended. Admiral Carter's face appeared on the screen again. This time there were other people with him. Leaders from different nations, military commanders, scientists. They all looked serious. Captain Brooks, Carter said, the Defense Council has made its decision. We're sending the first expeditionary fleet to the Velnar homeworld. 50 ships, including the Valiant. You'll be part of the main battle group under my direct command. Daniel felt his heart rate increase. This was it, humanity's first contact with other intelligent species, and it was going to be in combat. Your orders are to proceed immediately to the rally point at Mars orbit. The fleet will assemble there and depart within 48 hours. Our mission is to render assistance to the Velnar and remove the Krathiks' threat. Sir, Daniel said. Do we have authorization to engage? Carter's expression didn't change. Captain, those people out there are being slaughtered. They asked for help. We're the only ones who heard them, or the only ones who cared enough to answer. Yes, you have authorization to engage. You have authorization to do whatever is necessary to stop this. Behind Carter, Daniel could see someone holding up a document. It looked official, covered in signatures and seals. The Council has given us full military authority. Carter continued. We speak for Earth in this matter. We're not going out there to observe or negotiate. We're going out there to fight. Is that clear? Crystal clear, sir, Daniel replied. Good. One more thing, Captain. The Galactic Council has been aware of the Velnar situation for over a week. They sent the Velnar thoughts and prayers and asked the Krathiks to please stop. The Krathiks ignored them. The Council did nothing else. Carter leaned closer to the camera. We're not the Council. We're humans. When someone asks for help, we help. And when someone needs to be stopped, we stop them. Whatever it takes, the transmission ended. Daniel turned to his crew. They were all watching him, waiting. You heard the Admiral, Daniel said. Plot a course for Mars, maximum speed, and send a message to the Velnar on the same frequency they used. Tell them help is coming. Tell them Earth has heard their call. Lisa nodded and turned to her console. Her fingers moved quickly. The journey through faster-than-light space was not peaceful. The ships shook and groaned as they pushed through the fabric of reality itself. Inside the UNS Valiant, Daniel Brooks walked through the corridors checking on his crew. They had been traveling for 5 days now, and the tension was building. He found Jake Morrison in the fighter bay, running maintenance on his craft for the 3rd time that day. The young pilot looked up as Daniel approached. "Can't sleep, Captain?" Jake asked. "Can you?" Daniel replied. Jake laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Every time I close my eyes, I see those pictures from the distress call. Those cities burning. I keep thinking about how long it took us to get here. How many more people have died while we were traveling?" Daniel put a hand on the fighter's hull. It was cold to the touch, the metal humming slightly with the vibrations from the ship's engines. "We're moving as fast as we can. That's all we can do. Is it enough, though?" It was a question Daniel had been asking himself for days. "I don't know. But I know that sitting back and doing nothing definitely wouldn't be enough." Jake nodded and went back to his work. Daniel continued his rounds. In the mess hall, he found a group of Marines eating in silence. Steve Palmer sat with them, his massive frame making the standard chairs look like toys. When he saw Daniel, he stood up. "Captain, got a minute?" They walked to a quieter corner. Steve's face was serious, more so than usual. "I've been drilling the men hard," Steve said, "running every combat scenario I can think of. But the truth is, we don't really know what we're walking into. We've never fought aliens before, don't know how tough they are, how they think, what they're capable of. None of us do." Daniel agreed. "That's why we're going in prepared for anything." "Prepared for anything is the same as prepared for nothing," Steve said bluntly. "We need intel, Captain. Real information about what we're facing." Daniel knew he was right. They were flying toward a battle with only fragments of information, pieced together from a distress call. "We'll get it. Admiral Carter has reconnaissance teams ready to deploy as soon as we exit faster than light. We'll know what we're dealing with before we commit to engagement." Steve didn't look entirely satisfied, but he nodded. "Yes, sir." On the bridge, Lisa Grant and Ryan Hughes were still working on decoding more of the Velnar transmissions. They had picked up additional signals during the journey, though each one was fainter than the last. The messages were getting shorter, more desperate. "They're running out of power," Lisa said quietly as Daniel entered, "or running out of places to transmit from." Daniel looked at the latest decoded message on her screen. It was brief. "Anyone, please, still here. Still dying." He felt anger rising in his chest. The Galactic Council had known about this for weeks. They had done nothing, sent messages of concern and empty promises. Meanwhile, an entire civilization was being destroyed. "How much longer until we arrive?" Daniel asked. Amy Sullivan checked her navigation console. 6 hours, Captain. We'll be coming out at the edge of the system as planned." 6 hours. Daniel returned to his ready room and tried to rest. Sleep wouldn't come, so he reviewed the tactical briefings again. The Krathix Dominion controlled over 200 worlds according to the limited information they had. Their military was vast, built on conquest and subjugation. They had been expanding for decades, and no one had stopped them, because no one had tried. The galaxy, it seemed, was full of civilizations that had forgotten how to fight. Or maybe they had never known. They had grown up in a gentler universe than humanity, evolved on easier worlds, built societies without the constant pressure of survival that had shaped human history. Daniel thought about Earth, about the wars, the struggles, the disasters. Humans had nearly destroyed themselves a dozen times over. They had built weapons that could crack planets, diseases that could wipe out billions. They had learned cruelty and brutality in ways that apparently no other species had. And now, for the first time, those hard lessons might actually save lives instead of ending them. The ship's intercom crackled. "All hands, this is Admiral Carter. We're approaching the Velnar system. Exit from faster than light in 30 minutes. Combat stations full alert." This is not a drill. The ship came alive. Crew members rushed to their positions. Pilots climbed into their fighters. Marines checked their weapons. Engineers prepared damage control teams. In 30 minutes, they would know what they were really facing. Daniel took his position on the bridge. His senior officers were already there, focused and ready. He could feel his own heart beating faster, adrenaline starting to flow. This was it. First contact, and it was going to be violent. "All stations report ready," Amy said. "Weapon systems online," reported the tactical officer. "Fighters prepared for launch," came Jake's voice over the comm. "Marines ready for deployment," Steve added. Daniel opened a channel to the Admiral. "UNS Valiant ready, sir," acknowledged Valiant. All ships exit in 60 seconds. Stay alert. We don't know what we're jumping into. The countdown began. Daniel watched the numbers tick down on the main screen. 10, 9, 8. When they hit 0, the universe twisted. The smooth, distorted view of faster-than-light space suddenly snapped back to normal. Stars appeared, sharp and clear, and there in the distance was a yellow sun with planets orbiting around it. The Velnar system. Scanning, Amy said immediately. Her fingers flew across her console, sensors reaching out across millions of kilometers. Multiple contacts, reading debris fields in orbit around the fourth planet. That should be Velnar Prime. The main screen flickered and displayed what the sensors were finding. Daniel felt his stomach turn. The debris fields weren't asteroids. They were the remains of structures. Space stations, ships. How many people had been in those stations when they were destroyed? Reading active contacts, Amy continued. 14 large vessels in orbit around Velnar Prime. Configuration matches Krathik's designs from the intelligence briefing. They're in a bombardment pattern, Captain. They're firing on the surface, Lisa broke in. Picking up transmissions. Putting them on speakers. The sounds that came through made everyone on the bridge go silent. Screams. Explosions. A voice begging in that musical Velnar language, cut off abruptly. Then nothing. They're still killing them, Ryan said quietly. Right now, while we're sitting here, they're still killing them. Admiral Carter's voice came over the fleet channel hard as steel. All ships, battle formation Alpha. Launch reconnaissance drones. I want detailed scans of every Krathik's vessel. Find me their weak points. The fleet spread out, moving deeper into the system. The UNS Retribution led the way, its massive form casting shadows across the smaller escort ships. Daniel ordered Jake and his fighter wing to stay ready but hold position. They needed information before they could act. Amy Sullivan was the one who made sense of the drone data first. She had always been good at seeing patterns, understanding how things fit together. The Krathik ships were powerful, heavily armored with weapons that could level cities. But they were also predictable. They're maintaining a fixed formation, she explained, bringing up a tactical display. Each ship has an assigned position and fire zone. They're not deviating from the pattern at all. That's how they avoid hitting each other, Daniel realized. If they're all firing at the surface, they need to make sure they don't cross fire lines. Exactly. But it also means they're vulnerable to attacks from unexpected angles. They've set up their defense assuming any threat would come from the planet or from standard orbital approaches. Steve Palmer, listening in from the marine deck, understood immediately. They're not expecting someone to attack from above or below their formation plane, or from multiple directions at once, Amy added. Daniel forwarded the analysis to Admiral Carter. Minutes later, the response came back. Good work, Valiant. All ships prepare for combat. We're going to hit them from every direction they're not watching. But first, the Admiral had one more thing to do. He opened a communication channel to the Krathik's fleet. Lisa patched it through so the entire human fleet could hear. Krathik's vessels, this is Admiral Paul Carter of the United Nations of Earth. You are engaged in the illegal bombardment of a civilian population. Cease your attack immediately and withdraw from this system. This is your only warning. The response came quickly in a language the computers had to translate. The voice was harsh, filled with contempt. Unknown vessels, you are interfering in Dominion business. The Velnar are property of the Krathik's empire. Withdraw immediately or be destroyed. Then the Krathiks opened fire. Plasma bolts lanced across space, targeting the nearest human ships. But Admiral Carter had expected this. The fleet was already moving, scattering into attack positions. The Krathiks' fire hit empty space where the ships had been seconds before. All ships. Carter's voice was calm despite the chaos. Execute attack plan. Show them what Earth can do. The human fleet struck like a hammer. Jake Morrison and his fighter wing launched from the Valiant, their small craft accelerating faster than the Krathik sensors could track. They came in from below the orbital plane, exactly where Amy had said the Krathik's defenses were weakest. Targeting their troop transports, Jake called out. If we can stop them from landing more troops, we can help the people on the surface. The ruins of the Velnar capital city stretched for hundreds of kilometers. From orbit, Daniel Brooks could see where the Krathik's bombardment had been most intense. Entire districts were gone, replaced by smoking craters. But there were also signs of life. Lights flickering in the darkness. Movement in the streets. The Velnar had survived somehow. Admiral Carter ordered the fleet to establish orbit and begin humanitarian operations. Medical ships moved toward the planet's surface. Engineering teams prepared to help restore power and water. And Steve Palmer's Marines got ready to make sure no Krathix ground forces were still active. Daniel volunteered to lead one of the first landing parties. He needed to see it with his own eyes, needed to understand what they had been fighting for. Lisa Grant came with him, along with a small security team. Their shuttle descended through the atmosphere, passing over devastation that made Daniel's heart ache. They landed in what had once been a park near the capital city center. The trees were burned, the grass scorched black. But there were Velnar there, dozens of them emerging from underground shelters. They were tall and thin, their silver skin dulled by dust and ash. Their large eyes were filled with fear at first until they saw the humans. Then something changed. One of the Velnar, an older individual with decorative markings on their skin, approached slowly. They carried a universal translator, one of the devices the Galactic Council used for communication between species. When they spoke, the device rendered their musical language into English. "You came," the Velnar said simply. Their voice was filled with disbelief. "We called and you came." Lisa stepped forward. "We're from Earth. We heard your distress signal. We're here to help." The old Velnar looked at her for a long moment. Then they did something unexpected. They fell to their knees and began to weep. Soon other Velnar were doing the same, some crying, some reaching out to touch the humans as if to verify they were real. They said no one would come, the elder said through their tears. The council sent words of sympathy, but no ships. The other civilizations said it was tragic, but not their concern. "We thought we would die alone. But you came and you fought for us." Daniel felt a lump in his throat. He helped the elder stand. "We're sorry we couldn't get here sooner." "You are here now," the Velnar replied. "That is what matters." Over the next few days, the scale of the disaster became clear. The Krathix had killed over 2 million Velnar. Cities were in ruins. Infrastructure was destroyed. It would take years to rebuild. But the Velnar were alive, and that was something. Steve Palmer's teams found evidence of Krathix atrocities in the occupied zones. Mass graves, forced labor camps, plans for complete enslavement of the population. The Marines documented everything, gathering proof of what the Dominion had done. Meanwhile, something else was happening in the galaxy. News of the battle had spread. The Galactic Council called an emergency session. They wanted to know who these humans were and why they had interfered in galactic affairs. Admiral Carter chose Helen Price to represent humanity. She was a career diplomat, someone who had spent years negotiating peace between Earth's nations. Now she would speak for the entire planet to an audience of alien civilizations. The council chamber was vast, filled with representatives from hundreds of worlds. They came in all shapes and sizes. Some were humanoid, others were radically different. They were beings made of energy, collectives that shared consciousness and creatures that existed partially in other dimensions. Helen stood at the central podium, looking small and alone. But when she spoke, her voice carried throughout the chamber. "Members of the Galactic Council, I am Helen Price, ambassador from Earth. I come before you to explain our actions in the Velnar system." Immediately, voices rose in protest. Several species demanded to know by what right humanity had engaged in military action. Others questioned whether humans even belonged in civilized space. One representative from a species called the Zentari was particularly vocal. "You brought violence to our galaxy," the Zentari accused. "You destroyed ships, killed thousands of Krathix. You have no authority here. You are not members of the Council. You are primitives playing with weapons you barely understand." Helen waited for the noise to die down. Then she spoke again, her voice calm but firm. "You're right. We are not members of your council. We didn't ask permission before we acted. We didn't wait for approval or consensus. Do you want to know why?" She activated a holographic display. Images appeared floating in the air above the council floor. Pictures of Velnar cities burning. Videos of civilians running from Krathix soldiers. Records of the distress calls that had gone unanswered. Because while you were debating and discussing and expressing concern, people were dying. 2 million Velnar are dead. 2 million. And they died while this council did nothing. The chamber erupted. Some species tried to defend their inaction. Others looked away, unable to meet her gaze. Helen continued, her voice rising. "We are new to this galaxy. We don't know all your customs, all your rules. but we know what it means to stand by while genocide happens. Earth has that shame in our history. We have been the victims of it and, to our eternal regret, sometimes the perpetrators of it. We learned the hard way that evil only needs good people to do nothing. She pointed at the images still floating in the air. The Krathiks were committing evil. Someone had to stop them. Since no one else would, we did. A new voice spoke up. It came from a representative of a species called the Helvari, who had suffered from Krathiks raids in the past. But at what cost? You destroyed an entire Krathiks fleet. You killed thousands. Is violence always your answer? Helen turned to face the Helvari. No, violence is never our first choice. But when someone is pointing a gun at innocent people, sometimes the only answer is to take that gun away, by force if necessary. Daniel Brooks was watching the session from the Valiant. Lisa stood beside him as they listened to Helen's speech. She's good, Lisa said. She's really good. Helen wasn't finished. She called forward Captain Daniel Brooks via holographic link. He appeared in the council chamber, his image projected from light years away. Captain Brooks commanded one of our ships in the battle, Helen explained. He saw what the Krathiks were doing. He can tell you what we found. Daniel described the battle, the tactics they used, the losses they took. Then he talked about what they found on captured Krathiks vessels. We recovered data files from their ships, records of dozens of enslaved populations, mining operations that killed millions of workers, plans to expand their empire across this entire sector, and communication logs showing they had been monitoring your response to the Velnar crisis. He paused, letting that sink in. They knew you were watching. They knew you were aware of what they were doing, and they didn't care, because they had learned that your rules, your protocols, your careful deliberations meant they could do whatever they wanted without consequence. The council chamber was silent now. Species that had been shouting earlier were quiet, processing what they were hearing. Lisa Grant was called next. She presented the decoded distress calls, showing exactly when the Velnar had first asked for help and how long it had taken anyone to respond. 3 weeks, she said flatly. The Velnar asked for help 3 weeks before Earth arrived. In that time, how many messages did they receive from the Council? 47. How many ships? 0. The evidence was damning. The Council had failed the Velnar completely. They had treated a genocide as a diplomatic issue, something to be negotiated and discussed while people died. But then something happened that Helen hadn't expected. A transmission came through from Krathik space. The Emperor himself appeared on the Council displays, his reptilian face twisted in anger. So the Council has found new pets, the Emperor hissed. These humans think they can challenge the Dominion. They destroyed one fleet. Let them try to stop all 200 worlds of our empire. We accept their challenge. Let this be war. The transmission ended. The council chamber erupted in panic. War was something they hadn't experienced in generations. Most of the species present had never seen real combat. The idea of a conflict spanning multiple systems terrified them. Helen used the chaos to press her point. You see, this is what we're dealing with. The Krathiks don't respect your laws. They don't fear your disapproval. They only understand strength. And they will keep conquering, keep enslaving, keep killing until someone stops them. And you think you can? The Zentari representative challenged. One battle doesn't make you warriors. The Krathiks empire is vast. Even if you win, how many will die? How much destruction will you cause? Helen looked directly at the Zentari. As much as we have to. Because the alternative is letting them continue unchecked. You want to know what humanity learned from our violent history? We learned that appeasing bullies doesn't work. We learned that some things are worth fighting for. And we learned that freedom isn't free. Admiral Carter appeared in the council chamber via hologram, standing beside Helen. His military uniform was a stark contrast to the ornate robes and formal wear of the other representatives. The Krathiks have declared war on Earth, he said simply. We accept. We are prepared to fight them across every system they occupy. We are prepared to free every population they have enslaved. And we are... 6 months had passed since the battle at Velnar Prime. The war with the Krathiks Dominion had spread across a dozen star systems, and Earth was learning that fighting an interstellar war was different from anything they had experienced before. The distances were vast, supply lines were stretched thin, and every battle meant ships that would take months to replace. But humanity was adapting. Captain Daniel Brooks stood on the bridge of the Valiant, now part of the 3rd Expeditionary Fleet. His ship bore the scars of 3 major engagements and countless skirmishes. Burn marks on the hull, patched armor plates, replacement sections that didn't quite match the original design. But she was still flying, still fighting. Incoming message from Fleet Command, Lisa Grant announced. She had been promoted to full commander after her work decoding. Krathik's communications had helped humanity win 2 critical battles. Admiral Carter's face appeared on the screen. He looked older than he had 6 months ago. The weight of command was taking its toll. Captain Brooks, we have a new assignment for you. The Helvari have picked up distress signals from one of their mining colonies in the Andra system. Krathik's raiders hit them 3 days ago. They're asking for help. Daniel nodded. It was always the same pattern. The Krathiks would strike at poorly defended targets, take what they wanted, and disappear before reinforcements could arrive. How many ships did they send? Unknown. Could be a small raid or the precursor to something bigger. You're the closest asset we have. Get there, assess the situation, and render assistance. If it's more than you can handle, call for backup. Understood, sir. The Valiant broke orbit and made the jump to Andra system. Jake Morrison and his fighter wing ran pre-flight checks. They had lost 2 pilots in the last engagement. Replacements that still hadn't arrived. Every squadron in the fleet was under strength. Every ship carrying the burden of absent friends. You okay, Jake? His wingman, a young pilot named Charlie Ross, asked over the comm. Yeah, Jake replied, though it wasn't entirely true. He had been flying combat missions for 6 months straight. No breaks, no leave, just battle after battle. He was exhausted. They all were. Just thinking about the mining colony. Hoping we're not too late. We're always too late, Charlie said quietly. That's the problem, isn't it? The galaxy is huge and we're spread too thin, he wasn't wrong. Earth had deployed every available warship, but it still wasn't enough. The Krathik's empire spanned 200 worlds. Even with the support of the Helvari and the other species who had joined the alliance, humanity was fighting a defensive war, responding to raids and attacks instead of taking the fight to the enemy. Admiral Carter knew this. Back at Fleet Headquarters on Earth's orbital station, he met with his senior staff. Amy Sullivan was there, promoted to colonel and now serving as chief strategic planner. Steve Palmer attended via hologram from the Marine command ship. Helen Price represented the diplomatic corps. We need to change our approach, Carter said bluntly. Right now we're playing defense. We respond to Krathik's attacks, save who we can, then move on to the next crisis. Meanwhile, they choose when and where to strike. They maintain the initiative. What are you suggesting? Helen asked. Carter brought up a star map. Red markers indicated Krathik's controlled systems. Blue showed the alliance. The red vastly outnumbered the blue. We need to go on the offensive. Start hitting their infrastructure. Supply depots, shipyards, command centers. Make them defend their territory instead of raiding ours. Steve Palmer grinned. Now you're talking my language, sir. My Marines are tired of cleanup duty. Let us take the fight to them. It's risky, Amy pointed out. We're already stretched thin. Offensive operations will require even more resources. Staying defensive is a losing strategy, Carter countered. The Krathiks can afford to take losses. They have more ships, more troops, more everything. The only way we win is by making the war too expensive for them to continue. Helen considered this. What you're talking about could escalate the conflict. Right now it's limited to border regions. If we start attacking the Krathiks' homeworlds, they might respond with everything they have. They're already using everything they have, Carter said. We've intercepted their communications. They're pulling ships from garrison duty across their empire to fight us. They're conscripting civilians into military service. They're throwing everything at this war because they know if they lose, their entire empire collapses. Then we need to make sure they lose, Steve said firmly. The meeting ended with a decision. Earth would launch Operation Hammer, a series of coordinated strikes against Krathik's military installations deep in their territory. It would be risky, but doing nothing would be worse. Meanwhile, the Valiant arrived at Andra system. What they found was worse than expected. The mining colony was built on a small moon orbiting a gas giant. From orbit, Daniel could see that the main habitation dome had been breached. Smaller structures were burning. Debris floated in the thin atmosphere. Life signs? He asked. Lisa checked her sensors, picking up multiple signals in the emergency shelter. Looks like several hundred survivors. But Daniel, there are also Krathik signals. They're still on the surface. A ground occupation force, this was new. The Krathiks usually hit and ran. Staying meant they wanted something from this colony. Get me Steve Palmer, Daniel ordered. A few seconds later, the Marine commander appeared on the screen. He was on another ship in another system, but he could still provide advice. "What are we looking at, Captain?" Steve asked. Daniel explained the situation. Steve nodded slowly. "The Krathiks are holding those survivors hostage. If you try a direct assault, they'll kill the prisoners before you can reach them. You need a precision insertion. Small team, multiple entry points, hit them before they can react. Can you spare any troops?" "Negative. We're engaged on 3 different worlds right now. You'll have to use your ship's security detail." The Valiant only carried a small contingent of Marines, barely 20 troops, but they were trained and they were ready. Daniel called his Marine commander, a young lieutenant named Sam Carter. No relation to the Admiral, but he had the same intensity. "Lieutenant, we need to extract civilians from a hostile situation. How many troops can you deploy?" "All of them, sir," Sam replied immediately. "When do we go?" "As soon as you're ready." The mission planning took 2 hours. They studied the colony layout, identified where the Krathiks were positioned, and planned their approach. Jake Morrison volunteered to provide air support with his fighters. "The atmosphere is thin, but it's enough for us to operate," Jake explained. "We can keep the Krathiks pinned down while your Marines move in." At midnight station time, the assault began. The Marines deployed in drop pods, coming in fast and low. Jake's fighters screamed overhead, strafing Krathiks' positions with precision fire. The aliens had set up defensive positions around the emergency shelter, clearly planning to use the civilians as shields. They hadn't counted on humans being willing to risk everything to save those civilians. Sam Carter's team hit the ground hard. Krathic soldiers were bigger and stronger than humans, but they were slow. The Marines moved like shadows, using the mining equipment and damaged structures for cover. They worked in pairs, covering each other, advancing methodically. The Krathiks opened fire with plasma weapons. One Marine went down, his armor melted through. But the others kept moving, kept firing. They were outnumbered, but they had surprise and determination on their side. Sam reached the shelter entrance first. A Krathic soldier tried to stop him. Sam put 3 rounds into the alien's center mass, dropped him, and kept moving. Inside the shelter, he found the survivors huddled in the dark, terrified. "We're human military," Sam announced, his voice amplified by his helmet speakers. "We're here to get you out. Stay low and follow my team." The evacuation was chaos. More Krathic soldiers converged on the shelter. Jake's fighters made strafing runs so close to the building that Daniel feared they would hit their own people. But Jake's aim was perfect. His weapons fire cut down Krathic's troops while leaving the humans and Helvari civilians untouched. One of Sam's Marines, a corporal named Beth Hayes, held the rear position as the civilians evacuated. She was the last one out, firing her weapon until it was empty, then using her sidearm. A Krathic soldier got close, too close, and she switched to her combat knife. The fight was brutal and short. Beth won, but barely. "All civilians extracted," Sam reported. "We've got wounded, but everyone's alive." The Valiant's medical bay was overwhelmed. Human and Helvari doctors worked side by side, treating injuries from plasma burns to broken bones. The mining colony survivors were traumatized but grateful. The colony's administrator, a Helvari named Kelvin, approached Daniel. "You saved us. The Krathic said no one would come, that we were too far from help. But you came. That's what we do," Daniel said simply. News of the rescue spread. It was a small victory in a large war, but it mattered. More species began to see humanity not as violent primitives, but as protectors. Requests for alliance increased. Volunteers from other civilizations asked to join human military units, wanting to learn how to fight. The Galactic Council, which had been skeptical of Earth's methods, began to change its tune. They couldn't deny the results. Everywhere humans. Operation Endgame took 3 months to plan and execute. The fleet assembled in secret at a staging area beyond the outer rim, in neutral space where Krathic scouts rarely ventured. 70 ships from Earth, along with 30 vessels from allied species who had proven themselves in combat. It was the largest force humanity had ever assembled, and it was about to strike at the very heart of the Krathic's dominion. Captain Daniel Brooks stood on the bridge of the Valiant, watching as more ships arrived through jump space. The fleet was impressive, but he knew it wasn't enough to conquer the Krathic's homeworld by force. That wasn't the plan. The goal was to force a surrender, by showing the Dominion that nowhere was safe, that even their capital could be reached. Final ship reporting in, Lisa Grant announced. "Fleet is at full strength and ready to proceed." Admiral Carter's voice came over the fleet-wide channel. All ships, this is Carter. You know the mission. We're going deep into enemy territory to strike at Krathix Prime. The odds are against us. The risk is enormous, but if we succeed, we end this war. We save millions of lives across dozens of worlds. We prove that tyranny has no safe harbor. Daniel could see his crew listening intently. They were tired, worn down by 18 months of constant warfare. But they were still here, still ready to fight. Carter continued, We will offer the Krathix one chance to surrender before we begin our assault. If they refuse, we will systematically dismantle their military infrastructure. We will not target civilians. We will not engage in the kind of brutality they showed to others. We are better than that. But we will show them that continuing this war means the destruction of everything they have built. The Admiral paused. To every human in this fleet, thank you for your service. To our allies who have joined us, thank you for your courage. Let's finish this war. All ships prepare for jump. The fleet activated their faster-than-light drives. Space twisted and folded, and 100 warships vanished from the staging area, heading toward the heart of the Krathix Empire. The journey took 5 days, following Amy Sullivan's carefully planned route. They moved through sparsely populated systems, avoiding Krathix patrols and sensor stations. Every jump was calculated to minimize detection. Every course correction was designed to keep them hidden. Jake Morrison used the time to train with his pilots. Charlie Ross had become his second in command, and together they drilled the squadron relentlessly. They practiced high-speed maneuvers, precision strikes, and emergency evacuations. The pilots were as ready as they could be. Steve Palmer's Marines prepared for every contingency. They planned boarding actions, planetary assaults, and rescue operations. Sam Carter, who had been promoted after his heroics at Andra, trained his troops in urban combat and hostage rescue. Whatever happened at Krathix Prime, the Marines would be ready. On the 5th day, the fleet emerged at the edge of the Krathix home system. What they found surprised them. The system was heavily defended, as expected. Orbital stations, defensive platforms, and dozens of warships protecting the homeworld. But the defenses were oriented outward, watching the main approach routes from Krathix-controlled space. They weren't expecting an attack from this direction. They don't know we're here, Amy Sullivan said from the tactical station of the flagship. We have complete surprise. Admiral Carter made his decision quickly. Move us into position. Get within communication range of their government. I want to give them my message personally. The fleet advanced, still undetected. By the time Krathix sensors picked them up, it was too late for the defenders to reorganize their positions. The human ships were already in strike range of the planet. Alarms rang across Krathix Prime. The capital city went into emergency lockdown. Millions of Krathix civilians looked up at their sky and saw the human fleet hanging there like the sword of judgment. Admiral Carter opened a communication channel, broadcasting on all frequencies. The Krathix Emperor himself would hear this message. Emperor of the Krathix Dominion, this is Admiral Paul Carter of Earth. Your empire is finished. Your fleets have been defeated. Your supply lines are cut. Your allies have abandoned you. We have traveled across the galaxy to bring you a simple message. Surrender now, or we will reduce every military installation on this planet to rubble. The response came quickly. The Emperor appeared on the screen, his reptilian features twisted in fury. You dare threaten Krathix Prime? You are 100 ships against an entire world. We have orbital defenses, surface batteries, and a garrison of 10 million soldiers. You cannot win. Carter's expression didn't change. You're right. We probably can't conquer your world with what we have here, but we can destroy your government, your military command, and every shipyard and weapons factory on the planet. We can set your civilization back 100 years, and we're prepared to do exactly that if you don't surrender. You would murder billions of civilians? No, Carter said firmly. We would destroy military targets. Your civilians will be safe as long as they stay away from military installations. We will not repeat the atrocities your forces committed on the worlds you conquered. But make no mistake, we will end your ability to wage war, the Emperor snarled. The Dominion does not surrender to primitives. Kill your humans, destroy their fleet. The Krathix orbital defenses opened fire. Plasma batteries and missile platforms launched everything they had at the human fleet. But the humans were already moving, executing maneuvers they had practiced for months. Daniel called out orders as the Valiant dodged incoming fire. Evasive pattern Delta. Return fire on designated targets only. We're not here to fight the whole planet, just their military. Jake Morrison launched with his fighter wing, targeting the orbital defense platforms. His pilots moved with precision, their missiles taking out weapons batteries while avoiding civilian structures. It was difficult, dangerous work. Every target had to be verified to ensure no innocent lives were at risk. One of the platforms scored a hit on a human destroyer. The ship's forward section exploded, but the rest of the vessel stayed in the fight, its captain refusing to withdraw. Steve Palmer watched from the Marine command ship, frustrated that his troops couldn't participate in this fight. But he knew this battle would be won or lost in space, not on the ground. The fighting was intense but brief. The human fleet focused their fire on military targets with surgical precision. Within 2 hours, every orbital defense platform was destroyed or disabled. The Krathix warships that tried to engage were outmaneuvered and outfought by pilots and crews with 18 months of combat experience. Then came the hard part. Admiral Carter ordered the fleet to begin strikes on surface targets. The bombardment began with conventional weapons, targeting military command centers and communications arrays. The goal wasn't to kill, it was to blind the Krathix military and demonstrate that resistance was futile. On the surface, Krathix civilians watched in terror as human ships rained destruction on military installations. But they also noticed something strange. The humans were careful. They avoided hitting residential areas. They gave warnings before strikes, allowing personnel to evacuate. This wasn't the kind of warfare they knew. This was something different. The Emperor called for a counterattack, but his military was in chaos. Command and control had been disrupted. His fleet in orbit was scattered or destroyed. His surface defenses were offline. For the first time in the history of the Dominion, Krathix Prime was vulnerable. Admiral Carter broadcast another message. Emperor, you have 1 hour to surrender. After that, we begin targeting your industrial capacity. Your shipyards, your factories, your resource processing centers. Everything you need to wage war will be destroyed. Your people can survive this, but your empire cannot. Inside the Imperial Palace, the Emperor raged. His advisors pleaded with him to negotiate. His military commanders admitted they could not win. But the Emperor's pride would not allow surrender to what he considered inferior beings. He made a fatal mistake. He ordered a suicide attack, sending his remaining ships directly at the human fleet with orders to ram them if necessary. The Krathix ships charged forward in a desperate gambit. But Admiral Carter had been expecting something like this. The human fleet scattered, their superior maneuverability allowing them to avoid the ramming attempts. Then they counterattacked, targeting engines and weapons, disabling the Krathix ships without destroying them. Lisa Grant, monitoring communications, picked up something important. Admiral, we're detecting a transmission from inside the Imperial Palace. It's not on official channels. The message was from a Krathix general named Vex. He was one of the Emperor's senior military commanders, and he had seen enough. Human fleet, this is General Vex of the Krathix military. The Emperor has lost his mind. He will see our entire civilization destroyed rather than admit defeat. I am prepared to remove him from power and negotiate surrender, but I need your guarantee that you will cease fire. Admiral Carter made a quick decision. General Vex, you have my word. Cease your military operations and we will cease ours. But any treachery will result in immediate resumption of the bombardment. Understood. Stand by. What happened next would become legend in Krathix history. General Vex, supported by other military leaders who had grown tired of the Emperor's madness, staged a coup. The Emperor was arrested, his